His own commander called him the scum of the earth. He was, more often than not, a poor labourer or a starving Irishman, a man with no land, no trade, and no other way to eat. He was paid a shilling a day and barely saw a penny of it. He could be flogged until the flesh was stripped from his back for the smallest offence. He was far more likely to die of fever in a filthy camp than gloriously in battle. And yet this man, cursed, beaten, half-starved, and dressed in a coat of brilliant red, would march thousands of miles, stand shoulder to shoulder in a thin line against the greatest army in Europe, and break the Emperor Napoleon himself. This is the real life of the British redcoat, not the glory, but the truth of it. Almost no man of means ever chose this life. The ranks of the British Army were filled from the very bottom of society. The unemployed, the desperate, the drunk, and the men one step ahead of the law. Into the towns and villages came the recruiting sergeant, gaudy in his uniform, ribbons streaming from his cap, standing rounds of drink in the tavern and spinning tales of adventure, women, and easy money. And when a young man, deep in his cups, agreed, he took the king's shilling, accepting a single coin that sealed the bargain, along with a cash bounty that could be a small fortune to a pauper. But the fine print was cruel. For much of this era, to enlist was to sign away your whole life, service in effect, until you were killed, crippled, or too old to march. Many woke the next morning, heads pounding, to discover exactly what they had done. They had become, in the bitter phrase of the time, the king's hard bargain. The first thing the army did was take that ragged civilian and remake him. Out went his own clothes, on went the coat, the famous scarlet red that gave the British soldier his nickname for centuries, the redcoat. It was not chosen to be practical. It was chosen to be seen. A wall of bright uniform color meant to dazzle the enemy and stiffen the ranks. Over it went a set of pipe-clayed white belts, crossed at the chest, scrubbed a brilliant white, beautiful on parade, and a nightmare to keep clean on campaign. On his head sat the shako, a tall, stiff, near-useless hat that did little but make him look taller and grander. And around his throat was buckled the stock, a rigid leather collar that forced his chin up and his back straight and half choked him in the heat. Uncomfortable, impractical, and magnificent. The uniform's real job was to turn a mob of laborers into something that looked and moved as one. Then they put a weapon in his hands, and for generations it was the same one, a long, heavy, smooth-bore, flintlock musket, known affectionately as Brown Bess. By modern standards, it was a terrible firearm. It had no rifling, so the ball rattled down a smooth barrel and flew where it pleased. Beyond about 80 yards, hitting a specific man was largely a matter of luck. A well-drilled soldier could fire perhaps 3 or 4 rounds a minute, and even that meant a frantic sequence. Bite the paper cartridge, prime the pan, pour the powder, ram the ball, cock and fire. All while men around him were falling. So the musket was never meant to be aimed at an individual. It was meant to be fired in a mass by hundreds of men at once in a single crashing volley, a wall of lead thrown at a wall of men. And when the enemy got too close for that, the soldier fixed a 17-inch bayonet to the muzzle and the gun became a spear. This is where the redcoat earned his legend. Other armies attacked in deep, dense columns, hundreds of men packed together, driving forward like a battering ram. The British did something that looked almost suicidal. They stood in a line, just 2 men deep. Stretched thin and long, this formation let every single musket bear on the enemy at once, and it could unleash volleys of appalling speed and discipline. Column after French column marched into that calm red line and was shattered by the sheer weight of fire crashing out of it. But the line had a deadly weakness: cavalry. Horsemen could ride down a thin line in seconds, so against charging cavalry, the redcoats performed their most famous maneuver of all, the square. In moments, the battalion folded itself into a hollow box, 4 walls of men bristling with bayonets, facing outward on every side. No horse on earth will charge home into a hedge of steel. And so the square stood, men dying where they stood, closing the gaps, holding firm as the cavalry broke around them like water on a rock. Discipline, not courage alone, was the redcoats' true weapon. For all this, the pay was a shilling a day, and it was quite deliberately an illusion. Out of that shilling came the stoppages, deductions for his food, for the upkeep of his kit, for washing, for replacing worn equipment. By the time the army had taken its cut, a soldier might be left with just a few pennies, and what he got in return was rarely enough. In theory, the daily ration was over a pound of bread or hard biscuit and a portion of salt beef or pork. In practice, on campaign, the biscuit was full of weevils, the meat was rank, and often there was simply nothing at all. Men marched and fought for days on empty stomachs. What kept them going was a daily issue of rum or grog, and when discipline broke down, plunder, the stripping of the countryside and the sacking of captured towns, which even the great Duke of Wellington could barely control. And how do you control an army of desperate, hungry, hard-drinking men? With terror. British military discipline in this age rested on one thing above all: the lash. For offences as small as drunkenness, insolence, or petty theft, a soldier could be sentenced to be flogged, stripped to the waist, tied by his wrists to a wooden triangle, and whipped across the bare back with the cat-o'-nine tails, a whip of 9 knotted cords. Sentences were savage, not 10 or 20 strokes, but hundreds, and in the worst cases, over 1,000 lashes laid on until the man's back was a ruin of torn flesh, and he had to be cut down unconscious. His comrades were forced to watch in silent ranks so that they would remember. It was brutal, and many officers hated it, but it was also, in the cold logic of the day, the iron that held the whole machine together, the price of keeping the scum of the earth standing in line when every instinct screamed at them to run. But the thing most likely to kill the redcoat was not the enemy at all. It was disease. For every soldier who fell to a musket ball or a cannon shot, several more were carried off by sickness, by dysentery, by typhus and fever, by malaria in the swamps of foreign stations. Great expeditions could rot away without ever meeting the enemy. On one disastrous campaign in the marshes of Valcheren, thousands of British soldiers died of fever, while barely a fraction fell in combat. The camps were breeding grounds of filth and infection, and if a man was wounded, the surgeon's tent was its own horror, a place of the bone saw and the probe. No anesthetic worth the name, where a shattered arm or leg meant amputation in seconds, and the real enemy afterwards was the infection that so often followed. To be a soldier was, above all, to gamble with your health, long before you ever gambled with your life. The army on the march was never just soldiers. Trailing behind every regiment came the camp followers, and among them, the soldiers' wives. Only a small handful of women per company were permitted to follow their husbands on the strength, their places often decided by a cruel lottery drawn on the eve of sailing. The rest were left behind, sometimes forever. Those who came shared every hardship of the campaign and earned their keep, cooking, washing, mending, foraging, and nursing the sick and wounded. And far above the private soldier stood a different world entirely: the officers. In the British Army of this age, most officers did not earn their rank. They bought it. Under the purchase system, a commission was a piece of property paid for in cash, so that the men who led the redcoats into battle were very often wealthy gentlemen, while the man in the ranks, however brave, however brilliant, could serve a lifetime and almost never cross that line. At the heart of every regiment flew its colors, two great silken flags carried into the thick of battle. They were far more than decoration. They were the soul of the regiment, the rallying point in the smoke and chaos, and to lose them to the enemy was the deepest disgrace imaginable. So they were defended, quite literally, to the death. Behind those colors, this ordinary, ill-used man marched across Portugal and Spain in the long grind of the Peninsular War and stood, at last, on a muddy ridge in Belgium on the 18th of June, 1815, at Waterloo, where the thin red line and the unbreakable square finally brought down Napoleon for good. Wellington, who had called them the scum of the earth, looked at what they had done and admitted it was really wonderful that such men had been made into such fine soldiers. Underpaid, flogged, half-starved, and utterly magnificent, the British redcoat was the ordinary man who marched into hell in a bright red coat and beat an emperor. And history has never quite forgotten him.